I'm sitting as ever on the lawns behind the castle. Today I'm actually quite near the herb garden, which was something Geordie and I created as a healing garden to one side of the castle. And behind us is the afternoon tea marquee. So if you hear some cups and saucers rattling around, and even more important, plates, there are some delicious food being made for afternoon tea today. Today I am sitting with Ben Waite, our head keeper, who's only recently joined us. So in some ways it's looking at the estate, the woodlands, the farmland with new eyes. So welcome, Ben.
Hello, Lady Carnarvon.
Well, it's lovely to see you, Ben. And can you remind me, when did you actually start here?
I started on the 3rd of February this year, wow. So quite a new member of staff.
And little did we know that after March the 23rd it would go into a very more silent lockdown. And of course, I've already made a podcast with your predecessor, Eddie Hughes, who was with us for some 60 years. So I suppose you've been more with us, just over 60 days. Well, not quite, but anyway.
Well, I've got some very big boots to fill, I think.
I know. Well, I daren't ask if you're going to stay with us 60 years. Obviously, I hope you might.
I look forward to and hopefully will, yes.
And it was lovely to meet both you and your wife, Kate, and your boys. And I think your cottage has got a tree house in it, hasn't it?
It has. It's got a tree house, which the boys love to spend all their days running around out there, and also in the wood behind the house. And we've got the cricket pitch in front of the house there, which unfortunately they do sneak out and play there quite a bit. Make sure they're not digging any holes in the lawn. Oh, well, no, it's a great place for children to play. And I hope they'll come and watch the cricket with us next summer, well, if we're able to start again by then. Absolutely, let's hope so. I think it's one of the prettiest cricket pitches in southern England. But much of your life, I know, is spent on other sides of the estate, and one of the key roles, I think, in today's world is that of conservation. And I know we've had some wonderful tours round with you looking at some of your measures to feed and support wild birds, Ben. This year particularly we've done a regime of feeding the whole year. So when I came in February we worked hard to get hoppers out, and also water was a key thing this year, with it being such a dry spring. Although we have had some very heavy downpours, it's been very dry, and at the moment we're putting in excess of 1,000 litres of water a week out, which is not just to feed the game birds, but is also helping support the deer and the hares and all other aspects of wildlife on the estate. I've seen so many hares around. It's been a joy, and I was coming back quite late last night. I think I dropped something off to someone, and I saw so many friends, so many hares. It was magical, actually. It seems to have been a bumper year for them this year. They seem to have done very well and have got quite high numbers on the estate this year. So that's good, and that is also a way of judging the ecology of the estate, because if we've got large numbers of hares, we must be doing something right. Yes, no, absolutely. And no, the hares are doing very well. And you were showing me all the grey partridges, which you're also supporting, because they have become quite rare, haven't they? Yeah, partridges in the country. Latter years they've declined quite rapidly. Part of that is obviously due to the changes in agriculture. We're working quite hard here to bring back the habitat that they need. They need an awful lot of cover and a mosaic of habitat, really, from cultivated ground to stubbles to beetle banks, flower margins. We're trying to create a habitat where they don't have to move too far to get everything they need. So they've got winter feed cover, and also we supplementary feed with hoppers and the water, like I said, and then they can move on into their brood rearing crops where they've got a cover to have their nests and be in shelter, and then they haven't got to take their chicks very far away to an insect-rich flower strip to find food to sustain them to an older age. But we have also released a small number of grey partridges this year, trying to get them as close to a wild bird as physically possible. So what I've done this year is reared them in covey groups of between 20 and 25, and then I've fostered them off to barren pairs of grey partridges that have been unsuccessful this year, which gives them the best start possible and also helps them to believe they've been brought up by an adult bird, which in turn helps them for next year, for those hopefully bring off their offspring as well.
Wow, man, that is amazing. And it must take hours and days to achieve those extraordinary endeavours, actually. God knows what time you get up in the morning.
I start work at the moment about 5 o'clock in the morning. It is my favourite time of the day. Not only are people not expecting to see you that time in the morning, but half of the estate's wildlife is also not expecting to see you, and they can be, quite giving in, coming out and showing you themselves, and you can see them, and they're quite just not expecting you at that time in the morning. You can quite, as long as you sit quiet, you'll be surprised what you see.
In some ways, I think one of the team here you work most closely with, of course, is Simon, our farm manager, who has, like you, an innate and instinctive knowledge as well as a trained knowledge of the landscape and the woodlands and how things knit together. He never fails to surprise and amaze me with the depth of his knowledge and the closeness to the land with which he works. I always feel it's a privilege to be around with him, and having gone around a few times with yourself, Ben, again, it's the love, and perhaps also the fresh eyes are good, because you can do things the same way, can't you, without changing it around.
Absolutely. I think Simon has done a magnificent job with the estate leading to me coming. To be honest, there's not too many more things I can do, but I think it's just a case of moving a lot of things round and maybe making some things a bit more interwoven.
I love your word mosaic, because I think that's a brilliant way of explaining the interdependence and interrelatedness of the different nature. And I think one of the most extraordinary things here is, of course, there are few fences and there are few divisions, which means that we haven't divided nature or animals one from the other. They can move as they will, rather than as we prescribe. And I think some of the larger estates in England are unique and so important for that particular reason. And in the woods, we can let trees fall and collapse into themselves, and they become a wonderful repository for beetles and insects.
Absolutely.
And fungi.
Yet again, that's another way of saying we're making it a mosaic of habitat. Like you just said, we let the fallen trees, and we want a certain amount of dead wood for the insects to go in, so the woodpeckers can peck at them, and then in turn there's plenty of insects to feed all the finches and the woodland birds.
Completely. And then obviously you probably haven't had the time to get up to speed with the history of the estate, which obviously I've been reading about for ages. And, the fourth Earl in Victorian times used to record how we'd thoroughly enjoy walking around with a shotgun and picking off some pheasant and some partridge. And then obviously everything was brought back and cooked. And then in Edwardian times as well, the rabbits, the pheasant, the partridge, they fed a huge number of local families. And it's good meat, isn't it? It's delicious. I don't know how you most prefer eating some of the game from here.
We eat game on a weekly basis at home. My children absolutely love venison, but also we eat quite a lot of pheasant and partridge, and we also love wild duck at home. We like just pretty easily done, roasted or just pan fried in a bit with a sauce, and it's brilliant. It's low in cholesterol, it's low in fat,
and low in antibiotics or anything else.
Antibiotics.
Yes.
And I think how can we argue the fact that this bird has had a magnificent free range life? It can go where it wants, as you said. There's no fences on the estate. If it wants to leave the estate, it can, and all we can do is try to keep them here by making things as interesting for them as possible.
In some ways. I've often made pheasant curry or partridge curry. I always used to tell my son and stepchildren that the partridge was chicken, and now they're so suspicious now. Whenever, can I see the chicken, please, Mummy? Before.
Can I see the packet?
Yes, can I see the packet? But it's a very good meat. And actually, I was going to also try and produce a recipe for pheasant goujons, which are delicious, where you sort of dip them in yummy sauces as well.
Absolutely.
It's just the diversity of food, which, funnily enough, for all our advances with today's technology, when I look back at what people ate 100 years ago, I think they had greater diversity than what we do today.
Absolutely. I think, like you just said, they're much more diverse food and much bigger range of food, because they were quite happy to eat all different kinds of game, and they would have sustained themselves on the game from the beginning of the shooting season right to the end. They would have ate game in the castle, I would imagine, especially on a lot of your grand dinner parties. And
yes, it was a very important food and meat actually through World War II. During those times, the keepers who weren't called up and weren't part of the war effort at the time for medical or other reasons were also very good at coming back with game actually to feed the children and the evacuees living in the castle itself. I certainly thoroughly enjoyed the diversity of produce from here and all the vegetable gardens as well as everything else. And perhaps we're looking back a little bit to what Britain produces so well as we go through the next 6 months, which are clearly also going to change our lives a little bit, I think.
Difficult times.
Difficult times, aren't they? I don't know, when I look at the hills, whether there's a favourite place you found to walk or to be within Highclere. There's Siddon Hill, which is covered in trees and surmounted by the Folly Heaven's Gate, or the other side, as you're going down the far side of the Wayfarer's Walk, you've got the old terraces, which I always think of from the Bronze Age or Iron Age time, going to a large open expanses of chalk downland and some woods up by Hookwood, which are carpets of bluebells in the spring, but surrounded by banks of wild flowers later on in the year. Is there some places which you've really found and fallen in love with, Ben?
I think one of my favourite places on the estate, I mean, the whole estate is a beautiful estate and very well kept, but Red Pools has to be one of my favourite spots. I love to go down there and sit there in the evening, and Kate, my wife, brings a book down and sits there and reads. The two boys may take their little fishing rod and catch a few small roach from there, but it's just such a pleasant place to be. And many evenings we've been sat down there with a peregrine flying about over top of us and watching the ducks flight into the pond. It's just a very special place.
It's very old. If you walk around it from the chapel side, it is in fact a summer walk for visitors. It's closed at the moment, which also then gives nature a time when we're not so many people are trampling through and past them. But in the summertime, as you go down from the chapel, there's a huge old tree on its side, completely fallen down, yet still alive, and the roots have grown the other way into the ground, which I always have found fascinating. It's a very old bit of ancient woodland there as you look down to the left and the right, isn't it? It does take me back in time.
It's very wild down there as well. You've got all the rhododendrons that have just finished blooming and were absolutely beautiful a couple of months ago. And it's just a very diverse area down there. It's got a bit of everything, and you know we just love it. We like to sit there.
I gather there can be the odd adder there in the summer, which I've never seen, but I've got one of my sisters who's terrified of snakes, so she went down and of course saw a snake and ran away. I think she must have run a mile back up the hill.
Probably a grass snake.
It was probably a grass snake, but I've never seen anything like that. Having said that, the main thing is not to step on them and to look where you're going.
I think they like to be on the path there in the sunlight, but unfortunately I haven't seen them there yet. But I have seen the slow worms and I have seen the grass snakes down there. So
it's an amazing part of the world, and I always find Highclere amazing because people such as you or I, Ben, have walked through the estate, through the landscape and the fields for over 1,000 years, and whenever you walk, and the more you walk, the more you see the remains of a medieval village to the north of the castle in the grass. Perhaps that was the trackway. Going down the other side, there might have been the remains of a tile mill, because it's always been very windy, and I think you can testify to the wind around here. And so the bishops of Winchester in the sort of 13th and 14th century began a tile business here, making tiles to both put on the castle and sell. They were making tens of thousands of tiles a year, and it was quite a successful business, which then faded away and turned into nothing by sort of Elizabethan times. But you know, we've been in business, Highclere's been in business for at least 1,200 years in different ways, and constantly changing and adapting, and I love the idea of it both as an anchor and both as something that changes. But around it, what doesn't change is the fact that we're growing food and raising birds, animals, pigs, sheep to raise, which is part of our food cycle as the human race. And I hope we're doing it really, really well here, and part of it is about sustainability, conservation, the different habitats, and I love the way that you've embraced it. We found those periods of silence, particularly over the last few months early this year, haven't we?
It has been a very strange season for me, you know. But it also has given us chance to take stock at what we're doing, look at the habitats, plan for the future, and it's quite an exciting opportunity. There's a lot to do, but we will get there.
No, there is a lot to do, and I think one of the other things I've noticed, there seem to be an awful lot of berries this year wherever I look. So I don't know whether on country law it says it's a sign of a cold winter, or what your thoughts are about that.
It's usually been a sign of a cold winter coming. I don't think any of us can judge what's around the corner at the moment, but definitely a very good fruit year and a very good nut year as well. So hopefully there'll be plenty of food for our visiting winter birds. Our redwings and things like that will have plenty of food available.
So when will the redwings come and visit us? Do you know?
They'll probably turn up around about the end of October.
And where have they come from?
The redwings come from Russia and Scandinavia, and they gather on the Scandinavian coastline and make a massive 500-mile journey across to here, and will spread themselves out across the British Isles.
Well, I hope it's a better place to winter than Scandinavia or Russia, and a very welcome armada of wonderful birds for us. And it's, of course, funny because then I was up on the tower of the castle doing some photographs, and around me this was a couple of weeks ago, so the swallows were just about to gather themselves together. They were definitely eating some of the midges, there were clouds of midges there, and they then set off from here, I know, and go down to Spain and Portugal, Morocco, Africa. South Africa, Namibia, and these tiny birds, it is extraordinary what they do.
Absolutely amazing, the distance that such a small bird can travel. Obviously at the moment as well, which is very exciting to me and must be very exciting to Simon, is the fact that we've got quite a few stone curlews on the ground at the moment, which proves dividend to Simon, who has been working tirelessly to get the stone curlew plots in the right place.
Yeah.
And I was absolutely amazed. I've gone through my life as a keeper, the last 16 years I've been a keeper, and seen very few stone curlews, and went up over New Yard Bank last week to be greeted by 3 stone curlews on the track looking at me, and that's absolutely brilliant. It just shows that Eddie Hughes' hard work has paid off over the years, and it's great to see, and hopefully we can build on that as well.
They are amazing birds, aren't they? Very beautiful. Once you've heard them, you always know them, don't you?
Yeah, you do. I think I probably would have never spotted them if it hadn't been for the fact that they flew in front of me on the track, and then as soon as they sit back down again, you think, well, they've totally vanished. Where have they gone? And then you get the binoculars out and you find them, and I sat there for a good half an hour watching them. I thought it's brilliant. And then in the background you've got a big covey of grey partridges sat there calling. It's absolutely perfect. And also we've got a lot of lapwings. Skylarks are doing incredibly well on the estate. Meadow pipits, all of which are critically endangered birds, and I think they are doing very, very well.
Well, I always think it's trying to give these birds space and time away from all of us, because if we continually walk through them, and dogs off leads are always a case in point, it then disturbs them all, and they move away, they don't come back for their youngsters and everything else. But we are very lucky to be able to give them a little bit of space to find their way and grow in number. The lapwings have been doing very well for the last few years.
Very well. There's nothing better than watching 2 young lapwing chicks running around behind their parents. It's brilliant. In turn, obviously, like I say, we've done a lot of winter feeding this year, a lot of watering this year, and I think
the watering's made a huge difference, actually. So, a chapeau to you, Ben, because that's sometimes forgotten, or it's assumed that birds can find their own sources of water.
And as I say, it's a knock-on effect of managing things for the game birds. We've got the overwinter bird strips, which are in at the moment, and a couple of weeks ago were absolutely beautiful, massive sunflowers. But now you drive down and you've got a mass of finches and linnets that are all starting to find those sunflower soft seeds, and it's overwintered food for them. It's going to be interesting as the weather cools down in the next couple of weeks to see how many come. It's going to be large numbers of
I'd also wanted to do some conservation tours in the summer, in using the beaters wagon to do something like that, Ben. Of course, we can't exactly put several people in one big old beaters wagon at the moment, but it'd be lovely to work towards something like that. I think there's so much to share and to do, and by putting everybody in one area, it's a great way to share what we are trying to do, and even produce some pamphlets, information about it would be quite cool.
Absolutely. I think the problem at the moment is
time.
Time, and we are, gamekeepers are very much in the spotlight at the moment, but I think a lot of that is people are misunderstanding what actually happens, and I think you're absolutely right. If we could invite people to the estate and show them what we're doing, they get a greater understanding of it, and then it's maybe not quite as bad as it is all perceived to be.
I think in contrary-wise, I don't know whether you know, but Gwyneth, who lives on the estate, who was married to Don the gardener, went to London for the first time in her life. She's, I suppose, in her 70s, hadn't been there before, and she wondered what happened in London, so she decided to go up to London with Karina. A girlfriend of mine offered to take her up in a car, and she went up there, and again it was her greater understanding of what happens in London, which was opening her eyes to something so different. And actually this was before lockdown. I remember she came back and said, "Oh, Lady Carnarvon, all those people living in those funny little boxes high up," and it was such a different point of view. And she went to Harrods, which she'd obviously never seen. It was a busy street, and sort of getting out of the car, it was amazing. And then she's come back here and is very happy back here, but it understands London a little bit better, and I'm sure everybody understands the countryside pretty well already. But some of the interrelatedness, the interdependence, the way nature and the woodlands and everything else, you can't segment them. They are this mosaic of life which we can and can't see, and then there's the mosaic of life underneath, which is the fungi and the myceli, which interconnects all the plants and the trees. And we have some amazing specialists who come up here in September, October and start looking at fungi up by the Temple of Diana, because there are some very rare fungi as well as the field gentians there, and I've learnt so much from them. So again, it's that interrelatedness, but where you can see the quality of the soil and what grows on the soil as well. Amazing world, isn't it?
It is.
Ben, I haven't spent enough time with you to know where you grew up and what. Did you grow up in the countryside, presumably? And
I did. I grew up in St Marybourne, which is
not
a couple
far.
of miles down the road. I've always admired Highclere Castle. I was one of 4 generations of gamekeepers, and I've always had a passion for it. And I think I knew right from a 5-year-old boy what I wanted to do. And I think the main objective for me is that I think we're just custodians of the countryside, and I think our main aim is to leave things in a better condition when we go than we took them over in.
Well, I think that's a wonderful thought. It really is. And I remember when you came for the interview, because I think your wife came too. She'd driven with you, and I just thought that mattered, that she also might like to come and live here. It is a job for both of you, for partners, isn't it? Because you both have to buy into this extraordinary, I find, an extraordinary community and place to live. And its spirit, Ben, that matters as well. So absolutely. I feel very lucky that you've decided to come and join us.
Well, I feel very lucky to have been able to join you as well.
Oh, thank you, Ben. I can't thank you enough for joining me today in the middle of what is clearly a very busy day on your part, and I can't believe that you got up at 5. I'm not very good in the morning, I have to say. I always mean to get up earlier and fail. I really appreciate it, and I'm very much looking forward to the next few years, or however many years you feel you can stay with us, as we work and live and enjoy the extraordinary woodlands and farm of Highclere. But thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Just to say, please do subscribe to this podcast. Then you can be first on the list every time it comes out.